Imagination Storybooks presents Don't Step on the Spider, written by Kirk Raber and Mark Graham. Narrated by Peter Bergrot. Audio description narrated by Annie Donnellan and written by Bonnie Barlow from illustrations by Mark Zapata.
On the cover. On a sunny day, a big brown shoe rises over a spider sitting on the tip of a big green leaf. Big brown letters spell out the title, Don't Step on the Spider.
It is a warm summer day, with cotton-white clouds in the sky. 6-year-old Tim sits on the floor of his grandparents' house, playing a video game, while Grandma Maria stirs the kettle on the stove, and Grandpa Don sits in his favorite chair, reading a book.
In a living room on a purple chair, Grandpa watches Tim, a little blonde boy, as he sits on the floor playing with his video game. Grandma Maria peeks around the corner, smiling at them. Grandma has silver hair and a poofy hairstyle framing her round-cheeked, smiling face. Grandpa's silver hair goes in a circle around his head just above his ears. He has a matching mustache and beard and bushy eyebrows. He wears big square glasses.
Tim jumps up and says, "I'm going to play outside." "Okay, have fun," his grandfather says. The front screen door slams, and Tim hurries out. Suddenly, he calls out, "Wow! You should see this, Grandpa! Come quick!" Grandpa Don closes his book, winks at his wife, and goes outside. He sees Tim looking at a large spider walking on a beautiful spider web. Tim is about to step on the spider when Grandpa Don calls out, "Don't, Tim! Don't step on the spider." "But why? It's just a spider." Tim looks puzzled.
Tim sits on the ground and looks wide-eyed at a spider's web. Strands of silk web stretched between two branches in a circular spiral with a small spider at its center.
All life is important, not just people. All life is important, Grandpa Don answers. When he sees the look of wonder on Tim's face, he says, "Come with me. I will show you many different creatures that are a part of our living world." Grandpa Don pulls out his magnifying glass. He and Tim crouch over the spider and his web. "Meet Legs the spider. Legs, this is my grandson, Tim." "Hello, Tim," Legs says. "What do you think of my web?"
The spider appears larger in the glass of the magnifier with its oval body and round head. Its long 8 legs stick out from its body. It wears a large smile and waves one leg at Tim.
Tim looks through the magnifying glass and says, "Wow, that is the most amazing spider web I've ever seen." Grandpa Don winks at Legs and says, "I'm going to introduce Tim to some of our friends. See you around." And off into the woods they go. "There!" Grandpa Don calls, pointing excitedly to a meadow alive with blooming flowers and plants of all types. They walk to a patch of ferns with broad leaves and see a caterpillar sunning herself on a leaf.
The caterpillar's body is green and long like a worm, but thicker. It has 2 long curled antennae on top of its head and yellow dots for legs running the length of its body.
They bend down with the magnifying glass and find the caterpillar smiling up at them. "Tim, meet my good friend, Cat." "Well, well," Cat says, stretching her body toward her visitors. "So this is your grandson. A good-looking boy. Takes after his grandpa." "She talks," Tim says, with his eyes wide, hardly believing his ears. "Oh, I do more than talk," Cat assures him. "I've been eating all summer long, preparing for my cocoon, so I can transform into a beautiful new creature," Cat tells Tim, "like my friends here." Cat gestures to the many butterflies flying from flower to flower.
Tim looks open-mouthed at a large purple butterfly. It has the same body shape as the caterpillar, but extending from its back are two wide wings with pointed tips and rounded bottom edges. Dividing lines between sections of the wings make them look like stained glass windows joined together to form a beautiful pattern.
One of them, a beautiful yellow and gold color, lands on the tip of Tim's nose and stares into his eyes with a wide smile. "You do think I'm beautiful, don't you?" she says. "I've never seen a butterfly as beautiful as you are," he answers. "I'm Tim. What's your name?" "You can call me Madam." She winks at Tim and then flutters back to the flowers. Madam and all of her butterfly friends are busy pollinating flowers, so the flowers can make seeds and create food for people and animals. Grandpa explains. "A very important function in our world, Tim. We need caterpillars and butterflies, and they need us." Tim says, "I would never hurt a butterfly or a caterpillar." "Okay, then. Let's see what else we can find." The two walk a little further into the woods and spot a large anthill in an open pasture. They see streams of ants going in every direction. "Ants!" Tim calls out.
Tim hangs onto Grandpa's leg and peeks out from behind him as they spot a tall mound of dirt. The tiny ant waves in front of the mound.
"Oh, yes," Grandpa says. "Some of our most industrious and important friends." "Friends? Ants?" "Friends indeed," a serious voice says from some place near their feet. Tim freezes, and Grandpa Don chuckles. They look down at a small red ant carrying a very large piece of dirt on his back.
A line of 3 ants walk along the dirt in front of Tim. They carry dirt on their backs. The last one stops and waves at Tim as the others move on. Tim's eyes and mouth are opened wide as he stares at the small brown insect.
"Well, hello there," Grandpa Don says. "Tim, meet Atlas the ant. Atlas, this is my grandson." Well, well, well. Atlas drops his dirt and holds out one of his many legs. Tim bends down and shakes it, using his pinky finger. "How do you do, young man?" "Good, thank you. I'm learning a lot today," Tim replies. "I was just telling Tim how important you are, Atlas." "You can say that again," Atlas says. "We are not only one of the strongest creatures on Earth, given our size, Tim, but also one of the most Earth-friendly." "Earth-friendly? How so?" Tim asks. "Lots of ways. First, we build tunnels that make the soil healthier so that food can grow. Then we help water and air get to the roots of plants and make them strong. We also take seeds down into the ground where they can sprout and grow and become healthy plants." Wow, Tim's eyes grow wide with admiration. But before he can say anything else, Atlas lifts the large piece of dirt onto his back and joins his fellow ants. Tim and Grandpa Don watch them disappear inside the anthill. "Work, work, work," Grandpa says. He puts a hand on Tim's shoulder. "I guess we'd better get out of the way."
Geese high in the sky overhead look like little V-shapes with their wings flapping.
Tim and Grandpa pause for a moment to watch a flock of geese flying overhead, then cross the road and stop in the shade of a tall oak tree. Grandpa invites Tim to kneel down in a patch of lush ground cover. "I don't see anything," Tim says. "Not everyone lives above ground, you know," Grandpa says, as he begins digging into the loose soil. Suddenly, 2 large eyes appear in the dirt, and Grandpa laughs. "Ah, there you are, my wiggly friend. Come on out. I want to introduce you to someone." Behind the eyes is a long, plump worm. "And who might this be?" Wiggles says, eyeing Tim.
Tim rests his palm on the ground as he sits next to the worm who pokes halfway out of a hole in the ground. The worm smiles.
Say hello to my grandson, Tim. He is learning a thing or two about Mother Nature, Grandpa says. And how is your family, Wiggle? Wiggle the worm gives a low whistle, and 4 other worms wiggle toward them, 3 of them small and perky. We were busy fertilizing this very healthy soil until you 2 showed up. Tim laughs. Hello there, he says to the 3 baby worms. Good to meet you, all 3 say in harmony. We'd shake your hand if we had hands. They all laugh. Then his grandpa says, Our Earth wouldn't be as healthy as it is without our good friends the worms, Tim. Never forget that, okay? I won't, Grandpa, Tim says, waving to the worms as they burrow back into the soil. Bye, guys.
The little pink worms with their wriggly bodies smile. Music notes float over one worm.
The path leads them between 2 towering maple trees and a patch of sunflowers.
2 tall triangular-shaped trees stand on a hill overlooking rolling valleys.
Tim skips ahead and stops to admire the sunflowers, when all of a sudden, a bright red ladybug with black dots lands on his arm. Tim holds his breath. He turns slowly and whispers, Grandpa, look, right here on my arm. Grandpa says, No need to whisper. This is Lucy, a ladybug. Maybe the most beautiful of all insects. Right, Lucy?
The round red bug gazes up at Grandpa. It has black dots on its back and long curved antennae on its head. Tim looks on with wide eyes.
No maybe about it, Lucy says, moving from Tim's arm to his nose and gazing into his eyes. So count yourself lucky, young man.
The ladybug sits on Tim's nose and he crosses his eyes to see it.
Tim smiles. Oh, I do. In fact, his grandpa says, some people think ladybugs are a sign of good luck. I just think they make the world beautiful. Not to mention protecting your crops from a bunch of crop-eating critters, Lucy reminds him. Yes, indeed, Grandpa says, for which we are very thankful. Right, Tim? Right, Tim calls as Lucy dashes away. And I promise not to forget. Wow, Tim says, as they come to a field filled with thousands of bright sunflowers. So cool. Yes, Grandpa Don says with a nod. Mother Nature sure has a way with color, doesn't she? The closer they get to the sunflowers, the more bees they see.
The bees fly in all directions above the pink and purple flowers, carrying bunches of yellow pollen in their front legs. One has his mouth open and waves.
Boy, are they busy, Tim says. Don't tell me you have a friend here, Grandpa. I sure don't want to get stung. You won't get stung if you don't interrupt, a voice calls from one of the yellow blossoms. Sure enough, it is one of the bees. That's Buzz, Grandpa says. Buzz is flying from flower to flower and is too busy to stop. Don't mean to be rude, but we've got lots of pollinating to do, Buzz calls, giving Tim a wink.
Buzz gathers pollen from a purple flower. His tongue sticks out of his mouth and his eyes are narrowed at the flower.
What's pollinating? Tim asks, as Buzz moves from sunflower to sunflower, his wings buzzing. It's nature's way of fertilizing plants so they can produce food, Grandpa says. So the world has fruits and vegetables to feed humans just like you and me, and birds and bears and hundreds of other animals. We would never survive without the help of bees, Tim. Tim watches in amazement. I was always afraid of bees, but now, well, I think I love them. Me too, Grandpa says, taking Tim's hand and continuing their tour. The two come to a small lake surrounded by cattails and long grass. Fish swim in the water and birds fly along the shore. Tim, look there! Grandpa Don points to a bright blue-green insect with large wings and bright eyes, buzzing back and forth in the tall grass. What is it? Tim says. I've never seen an insect like this. That is Matilda, a dragonfly. Give her a wave. Maybe she'll come over. Tim waves. Hello, Matilda.
Matilda's long, thin body has large, oval, pale yellow wings. Her large antennae are topped with purple balls.
Matilda looks over when she hears her name and flies straight at Tim. He jumps back. Hello, Don, Matilda says, her wings buzzing. Who's the little guy? This is my grandson, Tim. Grandpa Don grins.
Matilda hovers in front of Tim's face. Tim smiles.
Didn't mean to spook you, Tim, but that's what people expect us to do. Spook them, Matilda says. Tim moves closer, his eyes wide. You're beautiful, Matilda, he says. The Japanese think dragonflies are symbols of strength, courage, and happiness, Grandpa Don says. I just think they're fun to watch. What your grandpa didn't mention is that we eat mosquitoes, which means there are a lot less of them to bite you, Matilda says. Matilda flies around Tim's head for a moment, then back to the lake and disappears. Wow, Tim says. Wow is right. Grandpa agrees. It's getting dark. We should head back. Grandpa Don doesn't seem to be in a hurry. He watches the great orange sun setting on the horizon. One of my favorite times of the day, he says with a sigh. Shouldn't we get going, Grandpa? Tim asks. How will we find our way home in the dark? His grandpa chuckles and wraps his arm around Tim's shoulder. I forgot to tell you. I have one more friend to introduce to you. See that? All of a sudden, Tim sees a small light coming right toward them, followed by many other lights. Holy cow, Tim says, as the glow of light grows around them.
A small flying insect has tiny wings. A light glows on the back end of its body.
One of the lights lands on Grandpa Don's hand, and he says, Well, well, well. If it isn't my very good friend Flash, a firefly.
Tim watches as the glowing creatures fly over Grandpa's open hand.
Flash looks over at Tim, who is now surrounded by dozens of fireflies all circling around. Tim laughs at the magical sight. You two are out pretty late, Flash says. Why don't my friends and I guide you home? I was hoping you would say that, Grandpa Don replies. Tim's grandma is probably getting worried. Onward, Flash calls, and all of his fellow fireflies gather together and form a beautiful circle of light. They all head back down the path.
Grandpa follows Tim as Tim races after the glowing fireflies.
When they arrive at the house, Grandma Maria is waiting for them on the porch. I see you have an escort, Grandma says with a smile. The best possible escort, Grandpa says. This is Flash and his friends, Tim says. Tim looks at the fireflies and says, Thank you, guys. That was fun. Sleep well, Flash says. We'll pay you a visit tomorrow night, too. The fireflies disappear into the night, and Tim and Grandpa give Grandma a hug. I want to hear all about your adventure, she says. The dinner table is already set, so Tim and Grandpa Don sit down. Grandma Maria brings them dinner.
Grandpa looks at a newspaper. Tim looks across the table at his grandma.
So, where have you two been all day?
Oh, Grandma, it was the best day,
Tim says excitedly.
I met so many friends and learned so many things.
Did you know that butterflies and bees pollinate flowers so that the world has more fruits and vegetables? Is that so? Grandma says with a grin. That's wonderful. Worms and ants help make the soil healthy so that our plants can grow and feed the world. We could never do without them, she says, winking at Grandpa Don.
No way,
Tim says, munching on a mouthful of broccoli.
And then there's Lucy. She eats other insects that want to destroy our crops. Lucy is so pretty.
Don't forget to tell her about Matilda, Grandpa says, sipping a glass of milk.
Matilda is spooky, but beautiful.
Tim is so excited.
Flash and his friends light up the night. What a cool guy.
I saw that, Grandma says with awe in her voice. Like magic.
But my favorite is Legs. I almost stepped on him earlier and feel terrible about that.
Tim sets down his fork. But we're friends now.
The bugs swarm together. They smile and wave.
This has been Don't Step on the Spider, written by Kirk Raber and Mark Graham, narrated by Peter Bergrot. Audio description narrated by Annie Donnellan, and written by Bonnie Barlow, from illustrations by Mark Zapata. This has been a production of Imagination Storybooks at imaginationstorybooks.org.